All right, Chubby, we are back live another week. We have survived. We're here to talk about the creator economy and just being creative individuals trying to grow businesses online. I think it's an
Great to
interesting
be back.
conversation. Yeah. Yeah, I love the title of this one, Heart versus Hustle, creating art that sells without selling out. I know that's something that you talk about a lot, is having heart with your selling, and it's something that I've been dealing with myself lately because I find myself creating content that is an artistic expression, and I often question: is this serving the business, or is this just more of my artistic side? And so I wonder, how do we balance the two? I thought it was a good topic for us to discuss.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's no place for a heart in business, so I'm kidding. Don't want to scare away the right people. Yeah, I think it's just something that very little is talked about because people are so much of this on this like masculine Alex Hormozy style, like let's just create this business of like doing this. Let's focus on the numbers. Let's focus on profit. But then so many people who do that find themselves empty, right? Because business is so much more than just the money itself. Of course, it is a money, and I think both of us agree that you need to focus on the numbers and you need to focus on making money because why else would you build a business? But there's a lot more to it than just the money itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the business is important if you want to grow your reach and build the impact you're able to have. So certainly, you have to consider the financial aspects of it, and then it's just that balance of kind of finding your voice and not getting sucked into playing that algorithm game. Because I think anybody who's been creating for a little while can attest to the fact that it sometimes feels like people who are just regurgitating content strategies that have proven to work in the past, they might get reach, but um, it doesn't necessarily make you any type of authority. It doesn't necessarily get you paying clients. So it's misleading. You see people with big followings, big reach, but you don't necessarily know how their business is doing. And I think those two, there's a discrepancy between those two things.
Until you see them disappear and no longer post, and then you kind of assume what happened.
Yeah.
Because like you can see so many people. I've been on X, for example, for more than a year now, and I see how many people have just left, right? And then I can't assume anything about their business, but at the same time, I know the same person who was like, "I'm a top 10% creator on X." That wouldn't be the person who just gives up and no longer posts, right? If that's their last post, or the one that they pinned. So there's this pyramid scheme that I think we talked about before that's going on when basically it's like any money coach. Many times the reason you earn more money, you make more money is because you talk about money all the time. The same thing goes for these growth coaches who simply become, their whole marketing is about helping other people get more followers. So then they get more followers because they constantly talk about it.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot more niches out there than just, growth and X growth and Instagram growth and LinkedIn growth coaches. So I think, yeah, we can talk a bit more about how we can leverage our unique, like set of gifts and passions and everything, not just to talk about the business itself, but also as an extension of who we are.
Absolutely. I wanted to pull up a comment. Sandra posted Gary V on here, and I'm curious her context there because I want to understand. Gary V is someone who comes up in my feed all the time. He's somebody in the creator economy I think most people know, and I actually saw something on LinkedIn yesterday where someone was mentioning him as outdated tactics. And, I'm just wondering what people's feeling is about Gary Vee's strategy, how you see it. Um, to me, he seems to post a lot, very frequently, comes up on my Instagram feed. It's often life advice. Pretty much all of the content is him sitting somewhere with this voyeuristic camera, sort of recording him having a conversation with someone you never see off camera. And he's giving that person advice. Kind of frames him as this wise authority. And, I'm just wondering, is that strategy kind of going out of style? Because I see similar things with someone like Sahil Bloom, who's a newer, face in the creator economy, very well established, but still relatively new in comparison to Gary. And he has a similar approach. Almost all of his content is him talking at, some conference or on some podcast. And I don't know, it does kind of wear a little thin. And I think about it with my own content. I have advice to offer. We have this podcast, and I sometimes use clips from this live. But I just wonder how are we seeing that strategy, that style of content now? Is it self-expression, or is it a way of just kind of doing something that's proven to work in the past? Is it no longer working?
Definitely a good question. So yeah, guys, anyone in the comments, feel free to react. Or yeah, how does that type of content come across? Because I'm curious too. To me, like, I can understand the framing. Everything is about the framing, right? If you understand anything about marketing and the human mind, it's got nothing to do with manipulation, but everything is about the framing, right? So you can frame anything in a certain way, and the human mind will look at it in a completely different way. Thinking of prices, right? The whole price psychology is about how you frame things as well. And I do understand that people would think, if I'm sharing what I shared on a podcast, or if there's like an invisible third person that I'm speaking to, that might claim a lot more authority. But if that's what people see all the time, like hundreds of times a day, sometimes, do people still listen to what you say, or they just become immune to it because they're like, okay, another video, Gary Vee telling people to like not care about their grandparents and what they say, but just keep doing it or whatever. So I don't know. Personally, I'm immune to this type of content because it's way too generic, and I'm beyond just listening to the generic advice.
Right. I think that is where it falls short. It's maybe motivational, but not practical necessarily. It doesn't give you actionable steps to take. You kind of get charged up, but then you need a next step. And, oftentimes it doesn't give you that.
Totally.
Yeah. So I think once you're more experienced and you've explored yourself as a creator, as somebody who's building a business, you start to need more tangible steps. And then just to play devil's advocate, because I love doing that, is, there's the flip side of that, where people who just give sort of that actionable advice, and it sometimes is that listicle style. We've talked about this before, and it doesn't necessarily infuse their personality in that content. It's sort of more just like, do A, B, C, and D, and you could read that anywhere. It doesn't necessarily come from them. It probably came from ChatGPT or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, let's talk about how that lands on the other side, because that's what a lot of creators and business owners don't understand about how to run a business and then scale it. It's basically all about understanding how people make decisions, the psychology of how people believe certain things. We talked about this in earlier episodes too. And thinking about what we talked about, right? Sharing listicles, sharing action items. This is what you have to do. I could tell you to do X, Y, Z. Does that really mean that you will, first of all, find it useful when you could just find it anywhere else? You can just ask, you could just type in a prompt to any sort of AI, and that will give you probably even more detailed versions of that than what I share. And what's the guarantee that you will actually do it? Or do it in a way that then you would say, oh, this was really helpful advice, because it's one thing to do something. A second one, that's another thing to actually get the results from it. There's a disconnect many times when, oh, Charlie just told me to like post a belief shifting video. And I'm like, yeah, did you do it? Yeah, I did. But it flopped or whatever. And I was like, yeah, probably because you didn't go through how the mind processes information. So you could say that you did it, but still not get the results. So that's why I think what we need to do now is like move away from this how to type of content, not just because people don't do it, just because you tell them how to do something, but because it doesn't speak to the part of the mind, part of the brain that is more susceptible to making decisions. The information, when there's too much new, it just moves past people's ears. So people don't process it. It doesn't speak to, you're going to sound like everybody else. There's no way for you to set yourself apart. And it doesn't speak to the subconscious part of the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely important to understand psychology and sales. Going back to our topic, Heart vs. Hustle, do you consider yourself an artist with your content? You post a lot of photos of yourself traveling, you document your life. Do you see what you create, that content, as art or more business or both?
I don't know if I would like say that I would identify as an artist, right? I just think that business is a huge part of my business is me. Like, people first buy me and then they buy my product, or then they buy whatever service I have. People don't just buy coaching, they buy coaches first, I think, in this world. So I don't necessarily identify being an artist, but to me, I cannot just do the business part, as in just focus on like providing the value, when I know how much it means if I show up as a leader, if I show up as the real role, the person who's just sharing their experience.
Yeah, I agree. I struggle with that as well. There are things that I know I could do that are kind of business driven and might get results, but they just don't feel aligned for me. They don't feel like they match up with how I want to be in the world. And I think that's where that conflict kind of plays out, that moral stance, artistic side, and self-expression, and not wanting to create things that I put on the internet that just don't reflect like who I am as a person. So yeah, I think it's a challenge that people face at all different levels of this journey, which is, why I wanted to talk about it today. I had a note here that I wanted to bring up, and I wanted to ask you, is there a moment when your emotional content felt risky or rewarding? Like we talked last week about cringe, right? Can you think of any time when you were putting out content and you were having those thoughts, those feelings of like, I'm not sure this is going to help my business, but I just feel like I need to do this?
Yeah, I mean, like, I did a lot of what's the best way to describe it? So with my first business, which is all about language learning, there's a lot of BS about how to learn languages. And I felt like, as someone who learned 5, I have something to say there. So I spent a lot of my time debunking myths and really talk about how the industry gives people bullshit advice. And sometimes I got emotional there. And I was like, maybe I'm just being too opinionated, which might work against my business. Instead of focusing on the beliefs, I focused on opinions. And I had a hard time balancing that out.
What was the
And
outcome? What was the outcome of that? Do you remember?
I mean, I don't know who decided not to work with me, obviously, or decided to unfollow me because of that. But I think what helped was create a closer bond or a tighter bond with my audience, the ones that stuck around. The same thing went when I just bursted into tears when I was right after COVID. I was in Malaysia and I saw how people came together the first time after 2 years, and I just got so emotional, and I just recorded all of it. And I was like, ooh, maybe this will work against me, because people wouldn't, who wants to like get coached by a man who's crying about something so trivial? But then I got so much support. Like, people replied in the stories on Instagram and everything. So that's, I think, the point. Since then, I'm a huge proponent of vulnerability and owning your emotions, because that's truly what really leads to connection. Not just you telling the stories, but being in the real moments of like the excitement, the fear, the sadness, the disappointment, the whatever. And I think people want more of that. They are sick of just seeing the perfect, emotionless business owner who just focuses on the profit. They want to see the real person behind.
Yeah, I agree. The biggest reaction I got out of any post was when I posted about a spiritual experience I had, and I had never really talked publicly on the internet about that type of thing, and I was very nervous about putting it out there. But when I did, I had people come forward from all periods of my life. I had people from elementary school that I hadn't talked to in 10 plus years reach out to me on LinkedIn or Facebook, and had a lot of calls that I ended up as they, I think, identified with what I was sharing, and they could see the vulnerability in it, and they appreciated that. So I think there is room for it to express yourself in that way, and to be vulnerable, as you put it.
Totally. Yeah, I think we forget what vulnerability means, right? And its real value, for example, for the audience. So many times when people are stuck with a problem and they can't overcome it and they look for that solution, there's a lot of shame, right? There's a lot of shame around why they can't do something. When we talk about some of our own struggles, we talk about some of our own experience, that helps people lift off their shame. And it tells people, you're not alone. I've had this experience as well. So that, again, what we think is vulnerability and a sign of weakness, other people would see as a sign of courage. And I think Brene Brown talks about this in her books and in her interviews as well, how important embracing vulnerability is, and how it's not about shame, it's about opening up to a human emotion, connection.
Isn't it funny how we learned this? I think a lot of us read her books back then. I did. When we learned these types of things, and some people always kind of find a way to exploit that, right? So you see people who are talking about authenticity, and they're the least authentic people, or they're trying to use their trauma as an opportunity to grow an audience online.
Oh
And
yeah,
I think it's funny because we can tell, right? Human beings are actually better lie detectors than we get credit for. So I
absolutely.
think,
We have our BS filters.
yeah, yeah, it's so frustrating or disappointing to be someone on the audience side and seeing someone like shamefully use their life event in a way to build an audience. I saw something on X this morning, that was a guy who posted on LinkedIn about his engagement, and he had his engagement photo of him like getting engaged to his girlfriend, and then the post was about the things he learned about B2B sales from his fiance. And it's just as funny. Like, I wouldn't do that to my wife. Like, I wouldn't leverage that life event as an opportunity to just create a LinkedIn post that gets attention. It's just,
Yeah, some of these are ridiculous. Yeah. Like I remember when once I was posting about somehow like my views were low and just was telling people that even though my views are low, that's not going to hold me back. I'm still going to be consistent. I'm still gonna be here for people who get my content. And then all of a sudden, I had 3 people in my DM saying, "Oh, I'm a ghostwriter and I'd be very happy to help you bring up your views." And I'm like, vulnerability didn't give you permission to like pitch right in front of me when I'm like, being vulnerable, sharing something I'm not necessarily proud of. And it's just crazy how people are using it to their own advantage. The other day as well, like as the Pope died, I just all of a sudden got an email from a travel agency organizing pilgrimages to Rome and like asking for a huge amount of money for that. And I'm like, the Pope just died and you're immediately sending out an email to promote your fucking business? That's just, where is the human there? So it's ridiculous sometimes.
yeah. Francis had a comment here that I liked. He said that resentment, shame reveals and vulnerability heals. That resonates with me because I've been writing a lot in my newsletter lately about things that have been traumatic or frustrating for me over the last 5 years, since COVID and all the things that have gone on in the world, and people in my family who passed, things like that have all kind of led to a lot of anger and frustration. And I'm turning that into art in a sense in my newsletter and in my writing. And it has felt therapeutic. It has felt like it's healing. So I'm taking that resentment and trying to turn it into something positive and hopefully inspire other people to do the same. So I agree with Francis there. And I just wanted to pull that comment up. Sandra. Yeah, we're getting a bunch of comments here. Yeah, life events, abusing stories for attention or getting following for gray hair and then switch it to expertise. Okay. Or getting following for gray hair, I guess. Being older, I guess. Is that what she means by that? I saw somebody on YouTube, the guy got like 250,000 views on his first video, because he was in his 70s and he had a picture of him dunking when he was like 19. I mean, and this was like a black and white photo. It looked like it was taken on a dirt basketball court in Indiana with a plywood backboard. And then he had a photo of him today, and he was saying like, I want to dunk again in my 70s. And he kind of rode this like train. Now there's a big like movement of people who are wanting to dunk because they're seeing all these like jump coaches online get people to increase their vertical through plyometric training. And I mean, the guy's not going to dunk. He's getting like 4 inches off the ground, right? But he took this popular trend and kind of took it further, because there are people who are like have videos of them dunking in their 40s, and that's been inspiring for people. And then somebody comes along and is like in their 50s. This guy's in his 70s, and it just gets more outrageous like each time. But he took it pretty much as extreme as you're probably going to be able to take it and get people to click. But Sandra's gray hair comment, made me think of that sometimes, you can use your age or whatever angle you have to kind of get attention or get acknowledgement. And, I think that can work for a little while, but you're going to have to obviously give people something to stick around for. So we'll see if that guy's able to do that. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you never know. You never know what people connect you on. Like you might just mention some sort of hobby that you used to have like 20 years ago, and there are 5 people in your DM saying, "Oh, I used to do that too," and you just never know. Which is why I think it's so amazing to be humans running businesses and discover our shared past, our shared interest.
Yeah. We got another comment here from Francis. The gut knows it's important to honor that. Yeah, I think we know. A lot of times when I'm creating content that resonates with people, right before I post it or when I'm writing it, I kind of get that feeling of it touches me first, right? And I kind of feel like that's a signal to me that it has a chance to connect with other people and touch them. So I think, yeah, like Francis said, your gut knows, and if you feel that, I think it can be a signal when creating content. Yeah. Anyway, so back to our topic here: heart versus hustle. I have an agenda kind of outline here that we can continue pulling from. But was there anything that you wanted to bring up before we move on to the next topics?
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about this enough. If there's anything else coming up with like the emotional sides, then yeah, we'll get back to this.
Yeah. Your coaching is particularly about heart-led sales, right? Magnetic messaging or heart, I want to get the wording right. Is it heart-led coaches or?
Yeah, so I use multiple ones. So it's either heart-led, heart-centered, purpose-driven. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Trying to like, create a difference between ego-led and heart-led. Because to me, business and service is not about you. It's about making it about the service, about helping others, which is, we still have an episode to dedicate to whether as a business or as a coach or a course creator, are you truly in service or you're enabling people, which is a huge topic we can talk about once as well. Let's just keep that in mind.
You keep doing that. You keep bringing up topics, and we're like, "Oh, we got to save that for next week," and then we don't. You've piqued my interest.
And yeah, we have to take a mental note. But yeah, so there's distinction between heart-led and ego-led, because there's so many stories that we have about money, deserving the money that we charging higher ticket, focusing on the money making itself too, but also the service part. And many times it's ego-led. Even if people say, "Oh, this is not about the money," many times there is a money trauma or some sort of money stories behind, where people feel like, "Oh, I just want to run a business that helps people," but it goes beyond money, when money is neutral. So the type that I teach is to really help my students understand that focusing on the money is one of the best things you can do, as especially if you're spiritual, because money itself is neutral. So when we talk about selling and we look at selling as, yes, I'm going to charge, so you pay attention, I'm going to charge, so you send me the signal that you're committed. There is a lot of spirituality there in terms of helping someone finally say yes to something that they used to struggle with. And that's, to me, heart-led, heart-centered selling, when, yes, you show up, you keep providing the value, but at the same time, you also understand how the best way you can help someone isn't through your free content.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a few things to talk about there. When you're talking about business and being heart-led or having a mission, That's something that I grapple with myself, because I am someone who's trying to help people live more fulfilling lives, but I'm also need to be able to sustain a business in order to keep doing that. So I think that's where the conflict lies for a lot of heart-led business owners. It's you're kind of sometimes feel like you're pulled in the direction of doing something that's very much business oriented, um, where it maybe feels a little unnatural or pushy in terms of sales, um, and you feel like you're maybe manipulating people, but really, I think you're actually, if your intentions are good, it's not necessarily manipulative. So I think that can be, yeah, I think that can be the struggle.
Can we not focus on both? Why does it have to be either or?
No, yeah, you absolutely can. I think it's reconciling that. It's figuring out like how you can do it in a way that feels um, authentic, whatever you want to call it, for yourself. And um, it's it's challenging because if you do some of these more emotional, heart-led posts and content, um, and you don't get as much engagement, you can start to doubt yourself, and I think that's the artistic or personal expression. And then you kind of find yourself wanting to balance it with some of the more business sided things. And when the business sided stuff starts to work, you maybe get a little distracted and start to like drift over into that space more. Um, and then you might start to feel out of alignment with what you're doing. It's kind of a fine line to walk, I think, as someone who has a mission and intention, but is also trying to do business. It's like trying to be a capitalist and and religious at the same time. Like it
Yeah.
sometimes feels like those two things are in conflict with one another.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I think, but this is the human experience. I think we're all humans. It's not going to be a straight line. It's not going to be a 50-50% balance, and nor does it have to be. So I think the challenge is to find a way to go back to our vision, because that's what ultimately creates everything. At least the way that I teach business, everything starts from that vision. And that vision is you as the heart-led leader who wants to make a difference in the world. And I think we are going to experience many times things when it's like, let's say you're launching, there's a bigger audience you reached, and then so many things you need to focus on the numbers and everything. But we can always find ways to say, okay, what is my original vision? What do I envision? What is my business all about? What is my deeper purpose? And then use that as well to build your tribe, to build your soul tribe, as I say, as well. So I think finding that balance is always a challenge, but as long as you find a good mix of both, I say, yeah, we can focus both on the business side and use that to live into our purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. What advice do you have for people that are dealing with that? Are there some actionable steps that you encourage people to take?
Did you bring up Francis's comment? Because
Yeah.
I think I missed it. So he says that's a good point about it being a fine line. That alignment is so unique to each person. There is a lot that can pull you off track, definitely. Yeah, because we are humans. And I think a huge part of our journey is to accept that we can only do as much, that we are humans, that we have a nervous system that we need to regulate or resonate more like. As I've heard a new expression, it's less nervous system regulation, because that's more like a control issue and more like nervous system resonance. That we do have to deal with. And there's going to be times when things don't go as well as you wanted, and you might fall off track. It might take you months to climb out of a black hole. So I think a huge part of that is honoring that we are humans and that we have our own emotions to process. We have our own experiences to somehow process. And I've just, two of my coaches went through a divorce, and in the US, divorce means your income is halved, as far as I know, right? So that was a huge financial loss for them. So they used to be millionaires, and then now, because of their divorce, they're no longer millionaires. So that identity issue, and so many things can happen beyond the scenes in your life that will impact your business, which is, I think, why the people who truly make it are not necessarily the ones with a bigger bank account, but the ones who are able to operate from the inside out.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
I forgot what the question was. I think you were answering Francis's, or you were addressing Francis's comment.
Yeah, kind of reacting to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think you asked me what's my advice. So I can bring it back
You
to
could
that.
use those as an example. One of those people. What advice you gave them?
Yeah.
Oh, I think we lost your video for some reason. This is a first. We've lost Chubby. I don't know what happened, but yeah. So in the meantime, I will. Oh, he's back. Here we go.
I don't know what happened. It was just thrown off.
Yeah, no worries.
My advice is always to go back to yourself, right? What you truly want out of this life, and learning how to regulate or resonate, so that you can build that resilience. Because running a business is tough, and if you're not bringing it back to why you're doing it, if there's not a strong reason that you could find, because everybody has a vision, we just might have been blind to it. We don't truly get clear on it. So it's always the first step when people come into my space. Yeah, that always helps, right? Because if we don't have that vision, we default to the vision that we don't want, which is also a vision. So I always say, if it's not coming out of faith and love, then you're envisioning that into fear. So it's going to be the worst case scenario how you operate. So my advice is always get clear, like crystal clear, on why you do it, to the point when you're crying about that future that you want to live into. If you're not crying about the reason you're doing it, you're probably not going deep enough.
What do you say to people who say, I just want to make some money? Aren't we overcomplicating this? Isn't this more of a sophisticated way of just doing the same thing, selling something online? Why does it have to be bundled in this existential burden?
What do I say to that? Well, you can make money. There's nothing wrong with that. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I guess in that case, perhaps that individual isn't your audience, right? There's plenty of coaches out there for people who just want to focus on numbers and focus on business growth.
But many times, that focus later on reveals the next step. As in, people who constantly focus on the money tend to end up, burnt out, or feeling like, why am I doing this? I don't even know. I have the millions, but I feel empty inside. So it leads to the next step, which ultimately goes back to something more spiritual related or purpose related.
Yeah.
Francis has a question.
Yeah. Okay.
Appreciate the engagement, by the way, Francis. So I met him a couple of weeks ago, and he's amazing. So how can you help them flip it so what they want is inevitable?
Did you see the first part? It's kind of a two-part.
I can see the comments. I just can't pull them on. So if a person thinks something is impossible, they believe the opposite is inevitable. how can you help them flip it so what they want is inevitable? It's a rhetorical question, so we don't have to answer it.
Okay. Tricky.
So, in general, a lot of us want certain things, but then the way the human brain works is that what we want is still outside of what we feel familiar with. So most of us, the reason we are not where we want to be is because there are fears around it that we haven't uncovered, which is why the whole smart kind of goal setting is actually dumb, because it doesn't teach you how to make your goal feel familiar already in the body, in the mind, with your thoughts, emotions, beliefs. So that's one thing I can just say to this too, that we all want certain things, but that thing we are still scared of. There's still fears around it, which is why we don't step into that future yet. But again, we can bring it back to the vision and focus on making the unfamiliar familiar.
Yeah. I'm going to post in the different socials a link to this studio. So if anyone wants to join, we have a bunch of people here watching. And, if any of you feel like you want to come on stage, ask a question, or just chat, that's available to join us. So
yeah, we'd love to hear stories. We'd love to hear your takes, insights. Let's put the social back to social media, I'd say, right?
Yeah. Let's see here.
It's just, again, Andrew learning how to multitask while hosting.
Yeah, I mean, typing while talking is not easy. I don't know. Some people can do that, but
I should be.
yeah, I need an assistant over here. I can just. That's why all these people who have podcasts have their like co-host or their what?
Their team. Sometimes it's their team doing this stuff.
But okay, so heart versus hustle. We got another comment here. Francis, very active commenter. I'm loving it. Cool. All right, so more on the agenda. I don't know. Here, forget the agenda. I don't know. What else can we talk about regarding heart versus hustle?
Nothing else. It's all about the hustle.
Well, that's the funny thing, right? Like hustle culture kind of took over for a while. I think I find it frustrating, at least in the US, nowadays, if you don't have 4 incomes, like if a couple doesn't have their main job and each have a side hustle, like they kind of can't really afford to live well, or they're viewed as kind of lazy or unambitious if they're not also trying to build some side business. It's like 70 years ago, you had 1 income in a household, then women went to the workforce, then it was 2. I mean, and like I said, now it's 4 are expected. You have like 4 income streams. And so it's just kind of wild. Like that hustle culture, I think, has really taken over, and everyone kind of in this war of attrition, competing against one another. You're not just competing against your neighbors anymore. People are competing against people halfway around the world who have more of a following on them on social media. So it is this kind of, it's like the ultimate rat race, right? We've taken this thing that used to be specific to career and like made our entire lives revolve around this competition.
Yeah. And then, there are also people who made it all possible. They have a few hundred people who they serve, and they have millions in the bank account, working a lot less than the people who have a full-time job and a side hustle too. And, I could, again, toot my own horn about messaging. and pricing and all kinds of strategies to build up that type of audience and build a business like that. But there's a lot of this hustle culture that's fueled by our belief of not being enough and having to just compensate for it by more work. When who says you can't just decide to double your prices? Why is there shame around that? So many different things. So you don't have to work more. So you bring in better quality clients, and so many other things we can talk about. So I think a lot of this whole hustle thing comes from people being in that doing, in that masculine energy that I think we led in with at the beginning. When building that balanced life is a lot more about how you balance both the doing and the being, the feminine and the masculine, which again is still not in the mainstream as much. Not sure about the US itself, but that's what my observation is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a new topic of conversation, masculine and feminine energy. You might hear it described as left brain and right brain, but it's essentially that balance, that yin and yang, that I think we all have within us, and it's just some cultivate one side more than the other. But yeah, I think there is room for both. I wanted to just talk a little bit about maybe some tips or advice for how to reconcile both, how to infuse your in your content work that honors both your art and your business. Just from my own perspective, it was important to me to have a product. So once I first identified my mission and what it was I wanted to do to help people, live more fulfilling lives through their work, I created a product around that. And once I had that product, I was able to create content that led people to that product. And having that anchor, having the product there, allows me to have some restrictions. And I think that's when you become most creative as an artist, is when you have restrictions. You give an artist no restrictions and you'll get a blank canvas and they'll just stare at you. But if you have rules, something to work within, it becomes an opportunity to express yourself. So that's what I would encourage people to do, is figure out what problem you want to solve, offer the solution, and then create content that allows you to express yourself, and while also guiding people to that offer.
Right. Yeah. Although I would caution people not to create the product before they know that it's something people would want as well, because 9 times out of 10, or probably 1 out of 10, about 100 people are able to create the whole product with all of its components and then be able to sell it. So a lot of this is about what you want. First of all, what do you want to help the world with, right? That's where you bring in your heart-centeredness, and then what specific problems you want to solve, and then see if that's something that people actually want help with, or that people want that thing, which is where the heart-centered thing again comes in. It's not just about this is what I want and this is what I tell you that you need. Because let's say if I'm freezing and it's cold and I just need a sweater, then don't sell me socks. And you can create whatever content, you can create whatever ad telling me that I don't need a sweater, I need socks. If I don't want socks, you're not going to be able to sell it. And I think it's important for us to understand how it's a dance between the audience and what people actually need help with, and what we want to help people with. Many times what we end up doing is, no, that's not something you need. You need this, and I'm going to provide this to you. And then people make their whole messaging, their content about something that people don't want, when that's something you can't really have an impact on. You can give people what they want, and then eventually when they buy, you give them what they also need. So it's you stay in service, you sell people what they wanted, there's no manipulation there. But then as an expert, when people are already in, you know what they need.
Yeah. Just to put it into context, that's how I approached my product and business. Ultimately, I think people need to live more fulfilling lives, that they have all this untapped potential. But I created a product that allowed them to start a business and make more money online. I kind of went to what they want rather than sitting around talking about exploring, their existential crisis and philosophical beliefs. That's something that can be addressed, but I went to what they want rather than what they need. Um, so yeah, just to put it into context, but I wanted to point out something you said, which is they should make sure people want the product before they build it. And that's a topic of debate that I've struggled with for years. Coming out of tech, there's this idea of creating a minimum viable product. And that is the least amount of features necessary to validate whether an idea is, has an opportunity to be successful. And it got so extreme that people started creating sales pages for products they hadn't built yet. And when that idea first hit the stage, people were kind of like, well, that's lying. You're misleading people. And there have even been cases where people made sales and didn't actually deliver. And then the strategy became, well, if you decide not to build it and people bought it already, just refund their money. So that was kind of like, and that's kind of where we're at now. I think a lot of people will say, don't build a product, build a sales landing page, find out if people are interested in this offer before you go out and build it, capture emails, maybe even take orders. And then if you get enough, you've validated that this is actually something people want, go and build it. It's tough to do that nowadays because I think we've all experienced the dozens and dozens of landing pages that we signed up for, we gave our email address, and we never hear anything about. I think people are reluctant now to even give away their email address until something is available for purchase, rather than, buy my book that's going to come out in 12 months, if I get enough orders. It's like, are you actually going to write that book? Have you started writing that book? I'm going to order it, and I don't even know if you're actually going to write it. So I think it's kind of becoming a little bit of a pushback now, where you might need to actually build a little bit of something to get people to bite. And I think as an entrepreneur, or as somebody who's a wantrepreneur, somebody who's not actually built something or started your own side business, it can be daunting, the idea of creating a product. And if you have excuses not to do that, you're going to use them, and you're going to have all these ideas that you've had in the past, and maybe you take them a step further and you create some little like landing page you made on Card or something like that, and you promote it a little bit, you don't get any interest, and you haven't even really validated yet whether or not people want this, because you don't really know how to sell yet. You don't have the experience of building a business for yourself. And I think it takes practice. And so I think sometimes you need to invest your time and build something and find out if like it's actually something people are interested in before you give up, like, and decide like, okay, this is not something that is going to work. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we can always approach it in all kinds of ways. I like to follow, there's a business process or process that we follow in the business coaching I'm part of, and it's called Monetize Before You Make It. And it's built up, the entire system is built up for purpose-driven entrepreneurs. If you're upfront about the fact that it's your first like iteration, and you offer discounts and everything else for people, and you've already established yourself, you build that trust with people, you show up as that guide who's there and says, I'm gonna bring in like 20 people and we're gonna do this beta version, and then build it together week by week, there's gonna be a lot more people who appreciate that because they will have that personal touch. They will have the opportunity to say, to make decisions. Like this is something, and I've been doing uh, years and years of adult education. And the one of the most powerful ways we can also make sure that there is more completion is when we are not just like, here's the curriculum, here's what you need, but we actually involve our students in the course creation process. So one of the reasons I'm big on this is because most people are a lot worse at marketing themselves than their own craft. So at the beginning, what we need is a lot of practice of like how that launch works, build up that landing page, see if it gets in front of people, see if it converts and everything else. And then when you have people in and you're upfront about the fact that you're gonna be building it together, it's a lot more likely to sell out, and you're gonna get the people who will appreciate that personal touch for the first iteration.
Yeah, I think you touch upon the build in public strategy, which has in the
I don't
last
like to
couple
say
years.
it like that because that's a very ex-hustle type of way of saying it. I don't think that's the same as building public, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I think there's some overlap in the sense that people now are often encouraged to share the process. So you build an audience by showing what you're going through, and you share your personal side, your own experience while building your business. You see it. It's not just on X. You see it on Instagram as well. There are plenty of people, especially women, starting fashion brands or starting like home like printing product services and things like that, and kind of showing other women what it takes to build a brand online. So I think um, I think there's that community exists not just on X, but on Instagram as well. And I get there's a distinction between what you're talking about, but I think there's some overlap there.
Yeah, I think for me, it's about building the product together. So I'm not like 2 steps ahead of you and just like learning from the next business book what the next module should be, but it's about that co-creation between the students and the creator so that they get some real test on how the curriculum works in its first iteration. You would record live the trainings, instead of preparing the whole thing and spending tens and thousands of dollars on all kinds of equipment and studio quality course and everything else. So when I say don't create the product in advance, what I mean is it's not worth it to spend a lot of money investing in a program without actually seeing if that's helpful material, for example. So adult education always works both ways. We want to be able to increase the completion rate. We want to be able to decrease how many people churn. Because what tells the success of a course isn't just how much you make, but how many lives it helps make a difference to, how many people are able to complete it or get the most out of it. And if we don't focus on how that lands on the other side, right? We just create whatever we think we want, not also considering the way people learn in certain ways, like audio, kinesthetic, visual. Some people love presentations a lot more. Some people just like to listen to our voice. Some people need a worksheet. People process certain things differently. So what's important is to have that balance between the students and the creators.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and a good place to end. I actually have to run, but I think this was another great talk, and I'm sure we could keep going on about this, but there's always next week. So I will be looking forward to it, Chubby. As always, I appreciate you joining me today and co-hosting this with me.
Thanks for everyone watching. And yeah, we'll probably talk about this distinction between enabling and service. I think that's a great topic to talk about then.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Chubby. Have a good night.